Hello, Amy.
Hello, Amy.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, all good. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you okay. That's good.
Are we
I was
live?
getting a bit of feedback. Let's get rid of this slide. Cool. There we are. I can see you now properly. Awesome.
Great.
Thanks for joining me today on a very
Yeah.
personal webinar. We were kind of saying before this, and certainly from my perspective anyway, that I'm very comfortable talking about TA and talking about things about other people and helping facilitate stuff. But this probably is the first time I've ever spoken about myself on a public forum, I think, really, which kind of feel like no one's really interested, but there are some people here, so that's good. Thanks, Amy, for bringing those people across, and yeah, I'm looking forward to getting into it, really.
Yeah, it's exciting, and I hear you. Like, it's very different to talking about different ATS systems and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit wild, but I'm excited as well.
Cool.
So yeah, maybe we should, I guess, let's do some intros if that's helpful, and then we can kind of get into it.
Awesome.
Just, I guess, before we start, just to make sure we're inclusive, you should be able to see the auto captions if you're coming in through LinkedIn, or also Google Chrome has a feature where you can actually generate auto captions. So hopefully that's okay for everyone. And I guess a little bit of a trigger warning, because of the nature of this conversation, we will be discussing topics around mental health, depression, potentially suicidal thoughts. And a disclaimer as well, neither of us are psychotherapists or doctors or health experts. So we're just here to have a very real conversation about our own experiences with ADHD. So I will go ahead and introduce myself if that's okay, Phil. My name is Amy. You can see here I'm founder of Amy's Career Hub. If you want a visual, I am a white woman with blondie brown hair tied back, and I'm wearing a light grey shirt. Yeah, and I guess, so Amy's Career Hub is to help job seekers get hired. I also do inclusive hiring training with businesses, usually HR teams and recruitment teams. And I guess a little bit about, if I'm to introduce myself through the ADHD lens, and a bit about my backstory. So I was diagnosed with ADHD last year only, so October, at the age of 34. And the kind of backstory to my ADHD journey is that, in school, I was an absolute, I was an absolute nightmare in school. I was always looking out the window. I literally was talking about this the other day to one of my friends. I remember a teacher throwing chalk at me because I was just like completely zoned out in the class. That was literally the story of my life. I was always kind of the funny one. I had no problem making friends, but I couldn't concentrate unless I was deeply interested in the topic. And how that kind of manifested in me was this of like, I'm a bit stupid. I'm, it definitely caused me to have self-esteem issues. And I then ended up, I didn't go to university because I knew that I would never, ever be able to concentrate and sit in a lecture. And just like, that's a disaster. And I'll feel worse if I drop out. So I ended up working in fashion retail, and I got a job with Ted Baker. That was always kind of in my family. My mum had a couple of clothes shops, and I kind of was interested in fashion, or so I thought at the time. Got a job with Ted Baker, and I had this amazing manager called Zoe, and she was quite transformational in my journey, I feel, because she really believed in me, and she introduced me to personal development books. And I was always really interested in learning about the things I cared about, and learning about psychology and how we all operate and what motivates us and how we are as humans. And it kind of, from there, then I moved away. I lived in Melbourne for a little while, and then I moved back to London. I got a job in recruitment with a company called Ambition, like an agency, and I just absolutely loved it. But it was really hard because I was like, going through training. I kind of faked it a bit to get my first job. And because I had read so many personal development books, I was able to, talk the talk and put on a good front.
Yeah.
And I got into this business, and they kind of invested in me. And then I just, I spent a few years in agency. I then moved in-house, and my last role was at Twitter, and I got laid off, obviously, because of the new owner. And then I set up on my own. And honestly, like, it's just been such a wild journey. It's not been an easy journey. And because I was doing a lot about inclusion last year, and I was looking into a lot about in neuro inclusion, and everything that I was reading, I was like, that's the way I am, that's the way my brain is. And getting the diagnosis now has kind of been a bit hectic. So yeah, processing it still, but yeah, I'm just really happy to share my story with other people, and I'm finally working for myself, which is amazing, but it was a bit of a journey to get here. So hopefully if I can just, we were talking about this earlier, if we can just inspire people today to think about even like a different career path that might help them a little bit if they do have ADHD, then that would be amazing. So I'm going to hand over to you now, Phil. Sorry, that was a lot.
Thank you so much. That's so good. Yeah, I mean, I think echo the sentiment that, I definitely haven't got 5 hacks for ADHD in my locker here, but I think what we're trying to do here is just sort of share our experience, and hopefully in some way that reassures or just helps someone in any way possible. So we're just hoping by sharing we can help, basically. So I'm Phil. I'm a founder of, I guess, a few businesses, but the main business is a business called Talentful, which is an RPO for the tech sector, which spans across the US and Europe. We've been going for about 9 years now. And I have a tech business called Talentverse, and also the hire community as well, which is the TA community that we're, I guess, talking from today. So a 39-year-old white man, as you maybe see if you can. I'm wearing a green shirt. I have a mustache, which is a debatably good decision. I'm not really sure at the moment. I'm trying to work that out. I'm based in Hastings, but I'm in London today in the UK. So I guess my story goes that I was a relatively intelligent child, or sort of did quite well academically in early schooling. But when I ended up going to a grammar school, a sort of selective school, and really struggled sort of academically to really, I suppose, get my mind to function enough that I could, fall into the exam and kind of coursework type of assessment criteria. So I tried to go to university twice and pulled out twice. From there, I just couldn't deal with the structure and couldn't deal with like the learning. I was just bored basically all the time. So I guess like most people, fell into first of all a sales job and then into recruiting. And again, I did feel like I was quite suited to it. I liked talking. I kind of there were lots of sort of dopamine hits that I could get all the time, and I think that's why you do probably see a probably higher degree of ADHD'ers in recruiting or in TA, because there are those natural sort of dopamine hits that form part of the job, really. I think that I was diagnosed with ADHD just after Christmas, so again, very much an early thing for me now, and I really feel like I've not figured it out just yet. I think I'm definitely in the maybe mourning period, or just really not sure what this actually means for me, that I wasn't walking into it thinking about it clearly enough. I don't think that actually it is quite a life change to know this. I am medicated at the moment, and I'm in a titration period, so they're working that out at the moment, and that's kind of also an interesting thing because I've never taken any regular medication before. So again, that's quite a change, and that can be quite up and down each day, as I'm sure many people have felt if they have been medicated. But obviously, I've led some really, really big teams here, and of both neurodivergent and also non people, and hopefully I can share a little bit about how that feels, I suppose, really, if you haven't managed big teams before. So yeah, I think is that good? Is that good enough intro, Amy? Does that help?
Phil, that was great. And you know what? I'm happy that you spoke about the kind of process that you're going through now. Because for me, I was when I got my diagnosis, I was just so relieved, because I was like, oh my God, I'm not like crazy. Like, and I know I don't use that word flippantly, but I think, there's probably a lot of people on the call, because of the waiting, the queues and the waiting lists are just so long in Ireland and the UK, everywhere. Which is really frustrating, because you're just like, oh my God, is this in my head? And for years, and so many people now, because it's becoming such a hot topic, I say that again flippantly, but it's so much more spoken about. And you say to someone like, I think I might have ADHD, and then they're like, oh yeah, I have a bit of that as well, yeah. And it's just so kind of, it really reduces your experience then. And you're like, oh, okay, yeah, we all have it. And I'm just like, and yes, I do think a lot of us who use smartphones, which is probably like 99.9% of the people in this event, It's ruining our concentration spans. Yes, and I agree that probably a lot of us have ADHD symptoms or, you know, concentration issues because of the way our brain is functioning after using social media. And, you know, I've kind of really tried to limit my screen time because of this, what it does to my brain and my concentration. But equally, having ADHD is a very real thing. And I think when I was diagnosed, just back to that point, it was a bit of a mourning period. And I remember thinking, like, I listened to a podcast about it before, and they were like, oh, you know, you're going to be grieving like the life you could have had. And I was like, that's ridiculous. Like, come off it. But I actually kind of it was less about grieving the life I could have had, but it was more about, oh my God, I spent my whole life being really misunderstood by like teachers, people just constantly, like, you know, if I was playing sport or whatever, just like I would absolutely sometimes just completely zone out.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know, someone might tell me their name. I remember one time like I met a distant cousin for the first time, and I was completely zoned out. And he was like, hi, my name's Michael. And I was just shaking his hand. I was like, hi, my name's Michael. And then I was like, oh, that doesn't make sense. I was like, it's just things like that. And then you're trying to be like normal, fitting into, and I guess that's masking, is like, you know, and when you're in the corporate world, that's really hard because you're having to kind of put on this front of like, I'm really high performing and I'm really good and I'm really normal and I can carry myself in a meeting. And meetings, like getting distracted. Yeah, but it's a really, it's a process.
Yeah, I think my experience that is quite similar. That I remember many times people wishing me happy birthday, and I'm like, yeah, happy birthday, like, you know, it's your birthday, it's not my birthday. But yeah, it's just the way my brain works, I suppose. Yeah, it's a really tricky one, I think, because I do think that, I mean, by the way, my mum doesn't believe that I have ADHD, which is quite interesting. But when I had the appointment, and I was very lucky to be able to go private for that appointment, so I just kind of got it within a week. The psychiatrist said they don't actually take the sort of parental view particularly seriously, because I mean, I haven't lived with my mum for 2 decades, and so therefore, what does she know really at this point? Bless her. But my wife obviously was taken into account a lot more, because naturally, she's living with me and dealing with me on a day-to-day basis, and it's quite a catalyst for me to get diagnosed, because she really pointed it out. She knew quite a lot about it anyway. So yeah.
I think that's sorry to jump in, Phil, there. I just think that's so important, having someone, especially if it's like your life partner, having someone that genuinely like believes you. And to be honest, so I moved back to Ireland at Christmas, and like, I'm so lucky I have such a great family, and I have like a lot of my loved ones around me now. But there is this sense of like, I don't have anyone that I know really that has ADHD around me directly. And there is this sense of like, I feel a little bit misunderstood, and I feel a little bit like I'm constantly stopping myself from even talking about it, because I'm like, I'm going through this whole thing. Like the last 2 weeks, I have just felt so overwhelmed. And it's like my brain is on like, it's like a motor in my brain kind of. And I think it's because like I'm very distracted, because I have, a lot of loved ones around me, and I'm like, I really want to see this person, but I have to do all this work, and which is a good complaint to have. But at the same time, it's just this absolute chaos, and it's so important to have people around us that understand it. And, I think community, and I am lucky to have people in my life that I can talk to and that I can share with as it relates to ADHD. And obviously, a woman and a man's experience is different. I think there's hopefully research now going into how it affects our hormones as women having ADHD, especially like, PMS and ADHD, like, oh my God, like what even is life? What's happening? There's so much, there's kind of so little research around it. And I know women are only really starting to get diagnosed in the last kind of 5-10 years, because all the research, of course, was done on men and young boys, and it was like a disorder that young boys had, and it was this old hyperactive boy in school. But actually, with women, the hyperactivity is often in our brains, which I can completely so having that network and that community around you of people that like validate you a bit, and that are like, no, you're okay, your feelings are valid, is just so important.
I mean, I think having the understanding, I think, is like super important. But there are definitely circumstances. I mean, I certainly talk from my life anyway, of having like 2 young children at the same time. It's like, yes, there's an understanding, but then there's just a lot of stuff that we have to get done here. And, sometimes you're just going to have to function in an environment where you have got two children screaming and you've got a business to run and you've got all these other things as well. But, maybe there is some part of masking, or at least, coping, I suppose, really, that you just some might have to shut off and just deal at the same time, and then give yourself some time to breathe afterwards as well, which is a hard thing. Yeah, I feel like it's sorry, I was going to touch on one of your points that you just made there about, like, I don't think I was ever really a particularly hyperactive person, and in fact, I'm sort of recalling quite often being called the calm one and the person that could deal with the most stress. But I took that at face value to a certain extent, but actually, really inside me, I was like, I mean, maybe I seem calm, but I am going crazy inside here, and this is all really, really intense. But I mean, that's just pure masking, basically, and I think that's kind of where I'm at right now. Is I am unmasking quite rapidly, I think, which is almost changing, not necessarily who I am, but certainly how I'm presenting, which is quite interesting.
Yeah, it is. It is, and you'd have to ask yourself: is a little bit of masking? Do we, in order to exist in our society, do we need to mask a little bit? Like, that's kind of sometimes what I ask myself, because I'm like, if I was totally authentically my very ADHD self, people would be like, I don't know, I'm like, would I have any friends? Would people just think I'm kind of zoning out? And that, I don't zone out of everything, of course. Like, here I am having an engaged conversation with you, and there's, I think there's so many great things to having ADHD. Maybe that sounds naive, but like, I feel so creative. I feel so kind of like energized about things that I care about. And I have a real, drive for social justice. And I think apparently that is a very ADHD thing. But of course, as you said, like, there is a level of masking, and there's a lot to do, especially as, as business owners. I was just kind of, I guess just before, I was just going to ask you if you could maybe share a little bit about, like, what brought you to, because I told you before, I'd come across Talentful when I was living in Berlin. I actually met one of your guys, and I thought it was, this embedded model, I think, is really cool. And I've been part of the hire community for a long time as well. So maybe let's talk a little bit about that, and like how you kind of came to be a founder and what that was like for you, especially with your, your ADHD brain.
Yeah, I think I've always been a pretty rubbish employee, to be honest with you. So it's kind of like I sort of had to do this. I think I was a pretty reasonable recruiter, in the sense that I always got on really well with people, and always I felt like there's a lot of people, I think, like candidates and clients, that really remember me from 10 years, even 15 years ago, because I just spent a lot of time with them, and probably spent too long with them, really just like getting to know them. But maybe I wasn't the best biller from an agency perspective, because I was just sort of off doing my own thing basically all the time. And I got fired a few times. I think that's probably something that happens quite a lot to ADHD'ers. Not really for, bad things, but just like not following the rules, basically. Just, I don't know, telling people what I thought, and, just nothing particularly bad, but, still, I got fired. And I've always been very entrepreneurial, though. And, I started my first business when I was 23, I think, with not very much experience, about 2 years experience. I was like, I can do this. If they can do it, I can do it. After falling out with another boss, basically, and failed. Basically, just didn't have enough money, and just didn't really know enough people really to be able to set up a recruitment agency. But then when I was, I think, roughly about 30-ish, I met Chris, who's my business partner now. We were working as contractors in sort of setting up TA teams in small startups in London. And we thought, well, there's got to be something in this, because we're providing quite good value really to these clients. But actually, the thing that's missing is the network effect of lots of people doing it. So I think I've always had a very creative brain, I think. And creative probably like less from an art perspective or that kind of thing, but more from a problem solving of just like, I can think slightly differently about things. And some of those are great business ideas. I mean, I think I was joking with you that I've got 20 business plans saved in my drive, which will never see the light of day, but that's kind of the way my brain works. I think so. It kind of started from there, really. But then the first part of running a business like this, is with most businesses, like a B2B business, is you need to go out and do loads and loads of pitching. And I remember me and Chris sort of running around London doing sort of 3 to 4 pitches a day, whilst also trying to do the recruitment at the start. And I remember the feeling of the motor, the kind of the ADHD motor of just, wow, I'm powered by like a rocket engine here. I'm going around. I can't really describe it, but really in the zone. And had no recognition that was ADHD, but clearly it was, because that's a very typical kind of thing. And I think there's so many benefits to harness if you can in ADHD, but there's just also big, hard things to kind of overcome. The creativity is a really big part. I think that a lot of people demonstrate that, but sometimes struggle to like harnessing it. And certainly some of the things that I've experienced during business is that there's often loads of shiny things that sit just outside of what you're doing, and it's very hard not to go after those new things, because again, they're dopamine hits. That like setting the new thing up is like super, it's very, you really want to do it, but actually my belief, and this is just my opinion, is that most successful businesses or business owners tend to be very focused at the start, at least, and try to deflect those things away, because becoming absolutely obsessed with one thing is so powerful in business, because you create the most amazing version of that thing. So that's certainly my experience anyway, I would say. I think it's actually become harder since we've had more people, because again, that's where you've got to really take everyone into account all the time and try to create things that are not just for people like me, that are actually for everyone. And trying to have that empathy and understanding, I think is tough, I think. How have you experienced it?
No. It's just a few things. There's so much to kind of to pick apart in what you just said, but I wrote down a couple of notes because I really want to double click. I hate that expression. I'm just joking. But I just want to talk about a couple of things you said. So first of all, okay, let's just talk about the whole creativity concept, because I'm going through this myself at the moment, because I think I also feel very creative, but I'm not like an art creative person. I'm like and again, like running a business is like you kind of have to be creative when you mentioned problem solving. For me, it's like I've created all of my logos and my branding and everything myself, and I was just so excited about doing that. And okay, that's like artistic creative, but I've been learning a little bit and reading a bit about this whole creativity piece, and I did a post yesterday on LinkedIn about kind of tapping into my creativity and how I'm now like on a bit of a digital detox about Instagram. I did put it back. I did log in today because I wanted to share that I was given the LinkedIn Top Voice badge. Really exciting. So I was like, oh my God, let me get rid of this, because I was getting into the habit of scrolling every morning, and just so bad for my brain. It's bad for everyone's brain. But yesterday morning, I started doing the morning pages, which of course is from this book, The Artist's Way. And it's all about kind of tapping into your creativity and what's going on really in your brain. And we're all so gifted in such different ways if we can actually tap into that. And even as I was just writing down, it was a total stream of consciousness. It was just kind of about the things that are going around in my brain. But it was almost like I just dumped them out onto these 3 pages. And then I was just sitting there. I was like, God, I actually feel quite calm now. Whereas the day before, and I don't know if you can relate to this feeling. And I wonder if, and this is what prompted me to go and get diagnosed as well, was since COVID, I feel like I'm constantly chasing my tail. And I don't know if it's working from home, like even no matter how early I get up, no matter how much I do, if I do a workout in the morning and I'm doing this and that and the other, I still feel like I can't keep up with myself. And I might have done like loads of great things in the day and like had a super productive day, but I'm still chasing my tail. This feeling of like, I can't get to the destination I'm trying to get to. I'm totally kind of behind myself. That started in COVID. And anyway, I think social media, like, yes, I need it sometimes for my business, but I do think it's bad for our brain. And because we're such dopamine chasers, I mean, I've lived in loads of different countries. I will just randomly book flights. I love chocolate. I love sugar. I love a dopamine hit. And the problem is it's very easy to get cheap dopamine hits, like on Instagram and even on LinkedIn. And so I think it's about allowing ourselves space to tap into that creativity and to really understand, like, if you are wanting to run a business, or you are wanting, even like I speak to a lot of career changers, and I had a client earlier today, and I was like, I feel like you could potentially be brilliant at, like, going out on your own, maybe starting your own agency. But it's actually allowing yourself to have that time to think. And if I didn't get laid off of Twitter, I would have just stayed there probably. And I loved it, when I was there. But I didn't ever have time to think. And I kept saying for the last, like, I don't know how many years, oh, I'm going to build up my side hustle. And I was kind of building it on the side. I was posting on LinkedIn for years. But, when you don't have that headspace, you don't allow yourself to have that headspace, you're actually kind of not tapping into your full potential. And I do agree, like there's a lot of great things about the ADHD brain. And, yes, it's really hard sometimes. A lot of the time it's really hard, but it can also be just like something that can be harnessed. I also feel like exercise for me has been so important.
Yeah, I'm so much better when I exercise. And I'm not in a good place with that at the moment for various reasons. But it's I'm definitely calm. I'm more sort of, I can just see through the sort of the trees or whatever it is in front of me. So it's good to comment on your thing about the sort of the early stage of business, particularly that. I guess the thing about being your own boss is that you can kind of do anything really, and I think that can be quite disabling in a lot of ways. That you could go in every direction, and the paper is pretty blank in front of you, even if you are already doing a few things. Trying to kind of get the blinkers on to get to put enough sort of thought behind the one thing you want to do or two things you want to do, it's so hard. And I do think that's actually how a lot of people don't succeed at the start, probably, is that you are this starry lights around you, the dopamine hits all around you, I suppose, really, and that just trying to focus on one thing and commit is super hard. And it's probably actually, I don't think that's just about neurodivergence, but actually I think it's just in general hard, but I think it just makes it even harder if you have an ADHD brain. It's not just you. I mean, even when we're setting up like a new product or a new company or whatever, I have exactly the same feeling of just like, about the hire community as an example. There are like 10 things we could do here, all of which are kind of a business in their own right within hire. The reality is I can't boil the ocean. Nobody can, unless you've got $100 million or something. But even then, it's probably not what you want to do. You probably want to do one thing or two things together and try and really, again, like obsess over it, spend time doing it, make yourself bored doing it, basically, and then maybe you can move on to the next thing.
I really feel that. I feel like I'm jumping around a lot because there's just so many interesting topics. But I really have felt that a lot recently, with trying to really niche myself and make sure that I'm very clear on what I'm offering. And you were so right, like the distraction. The other thing is that people, especially when you're around family and close friends and everything, they give you a lot of, advice, especially if you're setting up your own business. It's like, you should do this, you should do that. And I've had to start saying to my family, like, especially my parents, like, guys, I know what I'm doing. I just listen to what I'm doing and hear me and like be excited for me, but please stop suggesting things because you don't understand my industry or what I'm doing, first of all. And second of all, it distracts me because of course you rate what your parents or your family say because hopefully you respect them and you think highly of them. And but I'm like, no, this is distracting me. But just one other thing I wanted to say, because I, we're talking a lot about all these different things we're trying to do and, the kind of madness sometimes. But one thing I'm really desperately trying to do is like, and it's very kind of hot topic and a little bit of a buzzword, but having self-compassion, because one thing that, in my personal experience, and I touched on this earlier, is, and some people maybe can relate to this. So on one side, I'm like, oh my God, I'm so smart, I'm so brilliant. But then on the other side, like I can be so confident and I can talk in front of a room of hundreds of people, no problem. But I have a lot of self-esteem issues and I have a lot of self-doubt. And I think that is from probably being shit in school and constantly, internalizing this message. I'm not concentrating. I'm not intelligent. And of course I'm intelligent. I just couldn't find the intelligence. Like you said, we're all intelligent in different ways and we all have different wiring, and that's okay. And that's what makes the world go around. But I have to really like work at my self-esteem, and I have to really work at, saying no to people. I have way too much empathy. And then if you have too much empathy, people are just pulling off you constantly. And happens to me a lot. People are pulling off me, and I'm like, I need like real severe boundaries around me, and I need to be able to say no. Like I'm sorry, I'm protecting my time. I can't help you at the moment. If you want to work with me on a consulting basis, here's the link to the call, whatever. Even my family and my friends, it's just like you have to almost like put this barrier a little bit around you. But
Yeah.
there's also, and I was literally looking this up the other day because I was like, maybe I have ADHD burnout, but we do need to come into spaces where we have quiet time, where we can just sit in silence, or maybe listen to some music and just have total rest. And I think we don't understand as a nation how to rest. And I think neurodivergent people, rest is crucial. Silence, peace, a walk in nature, like that nurturing, that filling up of our cup, and not being so hard on ourselves. Like my internal world, I don't know about everyone else. My internal world is, I'm very, very hard on myself. I put a lot of pressure on myself.
Yeah, me too.
And I'm sure, you, of course you are, because look at what you've achieved in your business. But it's so key that we, try and find joy. Like I now don't work Fridays because I'm set up a band with my brother, and I would just try and practice music, and I'm learning the bass guitar. So I'm just like, that's my joyful day now. My Friday, my music, and I don't know where I do with that.
That sounds like a great idea. Yeah, I mean, I'm still really, really. Oh, we've got lights. This is very strange, like light in this room. Yeah, I mean, I'm still really, really hard on myself on really small things. So just like, I don't know, if I forget to email someone back one day, and then maybe it's like 11 o'clock at night, and I'm like, oh, I didn't email that person back. I'm like really beating myself up about it. It's like, it doesn't really matter. They don't care, really, to be completely frank. But it's still manifesting in that, and I'm really bad at making time for myself. And so I'm still constantly thinking in my head, I must work harder, I must work more hours, I must do more stuff. And that, I mean, for me, I'm just not in a place that I would even think about taking a day off. I should, and I could, but I need to get through this kind of, I don't know what it is really. It's sort of presenteeism in some ways.
Yeah.
I'm not sure who I'm presenting to, because I'm my boss, so it's not, apart from my clients, really it's just that, it's just me and Chris. So I think and I think I was saying to you about, I had like an hour spare after finally got very young children to bed, and I'm like there on Instagram just watching crap, basically. You're like, you should just go to bed. At least, just if you had that extra hour in bed, you'd feel so much better the next day. So yeah, these are my non-hacks, basically. Don't be like me. I'm working on it.
Well, you know what? Was I saying this to you, or I was saying this to someone the other day about this whole like 5 a.m. club and all this, like, sorry, but bullshit. Like, okay, great if you can wake up at 5 a.m. That's amazing. Good for you. But like, sorry now, right? Especially people, I would say, and from what I've read with ADHD, and I imagine other neurodivergent people, is that we absolutely need sleep. We all need sleep. And there's this culture of like, this grinding and this having to get up really early, otherwise you're never going to be successful. And I'm like, this is such bullshit. Like, I'm lucky if I get up at 7 a.m. That's like me doing amazingly well if I get up at 7, and I can't in the winter. And I'm like, it's too dark outside. I'm living in West Cork in Ireland. I'm listening to my body right now. I need those extra hours in the morning. And I don't care if I'm not part of the 5 a.m. club, like seriously, but there's just this kind of messaging that we're being given, and it's the same with even going and working out, and that's like, oh, the aspiration is to be ripped and have a six-pack. No, it's not. It's to like have a healthy, strong body and feel good, most importantly. Like I work out a lot for my mental health, and to have space where I'm away from a screen and I'm just like in my zone, and I can totally get into the disassociation pool and listen to the trainer and be like, yeah, I am zoned out, I am just in my body. But I think, like you said, we can't pour from an empty cup, and it is really important for us to take time for ourselves. And I also am really bad at doing that, but I'm desperately trying to do more of that. Like, even things like I recently did a breathwork session, because ADHD as well can be trauma from your life, from maybe something that happened in childhood. And it might even seem, you look back and you're like, maybe like nothing particularly traumatic happened, but like it could be that you know, a grandparent passed away, or that you lost someone, and which is of course traumatic when you're a child, but you internalize that when you're, you know, in your formative years. Children take everything on themselves. They think that everything is their fault. And that's how
Yeah.
they perceive things, you know, in the ages, I think, between like 0 and 10 or 0 and 8. So that's, you know, we're all like a little bit messed up in some way from our childhoods. And it is important to kind of look into that and be like, okay, why do I have these beliefs about myself? Why am I wired like this? Why do I put so much pressure on myself? It's a lot to do with our childhood and our upbringing and our inner child and all that. It's like kind of having to really work to heal that person inside. And there's lots of ways of doing that. You know, talking therapy is great. You can get an ADHD coach. You can do things like breath work, massage. There's so many different types of healing, but I do encourage everyone to go on a healing journey. I've been on a number of retreats, and there's so many out there now, and they're such a brilliant way to meet interesting people, and even just finding hobbies that I love cooking, you know, and I'm like, that helps me get in a zone that I'm like,
Definitely.
it's getting away from the screen, and we can get so sucked into also what everyone else is doing, you know, and that's why Instagram is so toxic.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think I've got an interesting question actually there from James. By the way, thanks to everyone for all the comments that are coming on. We can see them that come through a little bit later, but with a couple of minutes delay from LinkedIn. So James, who I know, hi James. Really good to hear about your experience, how you deal with it. Can I ask what it was like for you pre-diagnosis? Do you feel frustrated, lost? Did you always know that you had something or not? Do you want to take that, Amy?
Yeah, thanks, James. I definitely felt really frustrated and really definitely lost, kind of gaslighting myself a bit, like, oh, you know, I just because the thing is you kind of develop this brand among like your family and friends, and of course it's normal, and it's like, oh, you just kind of zone out, or you just have a nap in the middle of the day, and why are you always so tired? And you're like, oh my god, I'm such a freak. But then when you get the diagnosis, it's like, okay, you know, it makes a lot of sense. I haven't even really gone down the rabbit hole on a lot of the learning. I was reading Gabor Mate's Scattered Minds. I kind of think if you feel like you have it, you meet the criteria, you do any of those online tests and it says you has it, I have it. I think that's as good as getting a diagnosis. That's my personal opinion.
Yeah, I really believe that.
Yeah.
I think that I didn't actually ADHD brain. I didn't actually read the article, but there was something that came up in my newsfeed yesterday that was saying, I think it was about autism, that people who self-diagnose are exactly just as likely than people who are diagnosed professionally to be autistic, basically. So it absolutely validates that thought that, you know, frankly, if you read those, and there's so much information online, so many great books now, you know, if you read that and it's resonating with you, you've probably got it. Because why would you feel like you had something like this if you did, like if you didn't? Like, it's, I find it, I mean, there's obviously a lot of chat about, you know, this is like the fashionable thing now and everyone's got it.
Yeah.
But honestly, those people don't have it. If they really feel like this is something that people would do for fashion, they're mad, basically. It's just not going to happen. So yeah, I'm sure there are people on here who haven't, you know, as you were saying at the start, you know, if you're going for an NHS diagnosis these days, I think, are you looking at sort of 18 months, maybe something like that in the UK?
Yeah, and it's you. Yeah, sorry. No, I was just going to say, you mentioned earlier about, and I actually feel kind of ashamed that I did this, but I also went privately. And I think what's really important to talk about as well is intersectionality within this whole conversation. So we're obviously both white people who have gone privately. So, you know, I talk about this, and we're kind of part of the problem in a way, which is like, yeah, we're going privately, and then we're looking for the medication. The medication's running out. I'm currently not on the meds. I'm trying to get the meds. I'm also like on the fence. Should I go on them? Should I not? But there's a lot of white people in this space talking about ADHD and neuro inclusion and everything. And, you know, I also talk a lot about it on LinkedIn. But something I've been trying to drive home for a long time is to talk about intersectionality within that, like, you know, my experience as a white woman with ADHD. And to be honest, an Irish accent is kind of a bit of a privilege, especially when you live in London. So, you know, it's going to be very different for, you know, a little black boy who lives in Hackney and is in a overpopulated school and just can't get the help that he needs. So I also really want to just mention that it's so different for everyone, and we're both in kind of privileged positions. We've been able to kind of found our businesses and go out and get out there, and and it's and someone mentioned there as well about if you have a parent with ADD, ADHD, or dyslexia, it has a higher presentation in their children. Like, I am just looking at my dad constantly and I'm like, Jesus Christ, like the level of
Mine,
is
yeah.
wild.
I mean, I think that, it definitely. I can, 100%. And even if you, I mean, I sort of look back even further, like grandparents who are unfortunately no longer with us, but there's definitely something there as well. But obviously, in the 50s and 60s, there just wasn't enough awareness and probably ways to diagnose as well, enough knowledge, enough study that had gone into it.
That's it. That there's a lot more awareness, and I'm so happy that we have the language to talk about it, because in school, like, there's people that like we're kind of similar ages, and people that were in, when we were in school, that age, like now people that are in school are getting help because they have ADHD. Obviously, it depends on which kind of area that you live in, and if your school has that type of funding and support. But like, it is becoming more of a thing, and it is becoming more talked about, and there's more awareness, and it's really important because there's some really frightening statistics. 1 in 4 women with ADHD have attempted suicide. Like, that's such a devastating statistic. And some of the statistics, and like, honestly, I've had my own journey with my own mental health, and I've been quite open about this. It's hard to be open about it. Obviously, it's a very vulnerable thing to talk about, but like at the end of 2021, I lost one of my best friends to suicide, and it was absolutely devastating, and it was very shocking. It kind of came out of the blue. And I think that, paired with COVID, made my symptoms just go through the roof, and because I know they've gotten worse in the last few years. And last summer, would I say I had a bit of a breakdown? I wouldn't probably call it a breakdown, but I had a very, very low time. And I just felt like my mind was just like out of control. And I ended up going on sertraline, which is, a lot of people probably have heard of sertraline. It's an antidepressant, anti-anxiety. And I'm still on it now. And I'm like, okay. But I'm just thinking, maybe I didn't need to be on sertraline. Maybe I just needed to be on ADHD medication, because like a lot of what I was feeling was just this kind of constant like tornado in my brain and in my head, and this overwhelm, and not being able to explain how I was feeling. And my friends would laugh and be like, oh, you're so impulsive, and oh girl, are you moving now again to Lisbon or to here to there? And I'm like, yeah, because I'm like running away. I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm just trying to chase the dopamine. Or I couldn't explain it at the time. I wasn't able to say I'm trying to chase the dopamine. But even when I left London, I was a gardener, and I loved my job at gardener, but I just got so bored after 2 years. I was like, okay, moving on to the next thing. I need something different. And then I moved to Berlin, and I did love it. I really loved it. But again, I kind of moved around jobs. I would always get bored. And that people often look at me and they're like, you're just always moving around somewhere. You're just always up to something wild, and, have your hands in all these different pies. And I'm like, yeah, I do, because I need that. And then I became a spinning instructor while I was in Berlin outside, and I'm like doing all these crazy things, but I'm just like, that's kind of what I need to make me tick and to make me happy. But it's definitely also been a very difficult journey mentally, like a lot of this kind of,
Yeah. I mean, I suppose the holy grail is getting to the point where you just accept that that's who you are and that's what you actually need, rather than, and so, you don't need to defend yourself on it, but just be accepting of that. This is, I will be moving around a lot. I will be doing new things a lot, because that's just the way my brain works. I agree with that last comment. Actually, startups are an amazing place for folks with ADHD. I think that can be true for sure. I've definitely felt that. I worked in a lot of startups, but it's also quite unsettling sometimes working in startups. So there's not much to there's not much bedrock basically there. It's but it's good for dopamine for sure.
But when it's also, like you said earlier, blank canvas, you're like, oh, I can build all these cool things. Another thing, right? And I actually started writing my weekly newsletter about this. And of course, this week has just been so wild that I just still have it sitting there in my drafts. Anyway, I call this the glass window, which is basically like you can see what you need to do. You can see you have a vision of how you want your business to be and what you want it to look like, but you keep getting blocked at these different, like which platform will I host my course on? That was bugging me for the last like 3 months. Which bank account will I open? Which business bank account will I use? And I'm like, oh my God, these are just stupid little admin things. They're all giving me the same thing. I'll just pick one and go with it. Why am I like thinking the platform? I eventually went with Kajabi because my favorite influencer, Justin Welch, uses that. So I was like, if it's good enough for Justin, it's good enough for me. But like, Jesus, the amount of time I spent like hyper focusing on which one to use. But I get so caught up on these stupid little admin tasks, and I'm just like, I do need to get a virtual assistant, to be honest, because I just can't. There's so much stupid stuff that I'm wasting my time on that I'm like, that needs to go to someone else. Want to go really quickly and just go back to the thing about the whole medication piece, because I know that like, I don't know if people are out there feeling like me, and it was the same when I went on sertraline. I was really slow to go on medication and to be medicated, because I was like, what if it changes my personality? What if it makes me kind of numb and zone out a bit, more so than I already do? But I have to say, it really did help me just overcome. It took the edge off a bit, and I've met a lot of people, there's stigma, and of course there's always side effects of medication, and there is stigma around it, and it's so deeply personal. But I think, you're kind of trying it. I'm trying to get it currently, but like, I'm kind of deliberating, is it right for me? Should I try some type of, I don't know, plant-based living and meditation? But of course, sitting down with an ADHD brain and trying to meditate is like a nightmare, unless it's transcendental, which I find good because you're listening to a noise.
I didn't actually think that deeply about it. I thought, well, when I spoke to a psychiatrist, he said, you cannot have it, or you can have it. And I thought, well, I want to try, because ultimately, if it doesn't work or I don't like it, I can just stop. So that's kind of what I'm doing. And for me, I probably see this as like the next maybe 2 or 3 years of doing it. We're on a sort of growth journey in the business, and so it's important for the next few years to be as focused as I can be. Potentially after that point, maybe if I'm doing something different, then I might not take it. I don't imagine I will keep it going for the rest of my life. I think he was saying that it's sort of generally safe. I'm taking Concerta. To take it for a couple of years, there's not that much risk of an increased risk of heart attacks or whatever. But after that point, there is a slightly increased risk. I don't think it's sort of hugely material, but obviously they're pointing it out from a medical standpoint. That's kind of my thought at the moment. I mean, I was saying to you a couple of days ago that like, I've definitely had days where I've been absolutely flying high as a kite, and I don't really know why that is the case. I'm taking exactly the same titration, but just I think maybe something to do with, could be coupled with caffeine, or what I've eaten that day, or kind of probably amounts of carbs and all that kind of stuff. So I'm kind of figuring that out at the moment. Like, I don't want to be high as a kite every single day, because I don't think that's productive either. But yeah, it's just trying to get the sort of the balance there, I think.
It's I hear you. And I think one thing that I have been doing that definitely also helps me is, like, on a Sunday, I will look ahead at my week, and I will just make sure that I have enough time in the day to kind of have a little bit of quiet time, maybe have a walk, obviously doing my exercise maybe in the morning, because that gives me that kind of dopamine hit that helps me through the day. And when the weather gets good again, I was sea swimming a lot last year. I'll do that because that is just amazing for the mental health and the dopamine. Oh my God, the sea swimming. Like, I won't need any meds if I can get myself into the sea every day. But excuse me. The thing is, like, so, I do a lot of one-on-one kind of advisory sessions with people when they're doing their job search. So I will really only do maybe one of those sessions a day, because I feel like maximum 2, but normally I would just do 1, because I feel like I need to really kind of be in the zone, and I really want to give that person the value. So maybe I'll spend the rest of the day. I mean, there's so many things that I'm trying to do as well alongside that, but it's like having kind of preserving my energy a bit. and making sure that I have the brain mass, the brain energy to actually really focus and really kind of deliver that person value. And like I think back to my first days when I was a partner in my first in-house role, and I used to have interviews, like 5 or 6 interviews back to back to back to back. Like, what? How did I do that candidate any justice or write any proper? I would be like typing as I go, and my head was always spinning. Like, to be honest, I really loved it, but my manager, then I would be like at the end of the day trying to do loads of admin. My manager at the time, she was amazing, Mia. She was just like, you need to have half an hour blocks between each of your calls so that you can just take a little bit of a breather and catch up on yourself. And now having like looking ahead at my weeks and being like, okay, I need to kind of space things out and give myself a little bit of space. And that's what I had this amazing therapist after my friend passed away. And she spoke a lot about like creating space. And she said, when you open the door, don't open it outwards so that you're just in and everyone's able to access you. Open it inwards so that you have this kind of space between you and that other person. And it took me so long to kind of figure out what she meant. But now I'm like, oh my God, I'm just like creating the space, and I'm able to kind of breathe and I'm able to think. And that's also very powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, my light's gone off again. We're coming up to 52 minutes. So yeah, I'm kind of aware when I'm talking about this. I think you were touching on a bit earlier that I'm aware of like the privilege that I'm talking from. I suppose really that, I can access sort of the private diagnoses, but also just in general that, I have managed to sort of succeed in this kind of in the neurotypical world. But that, I think it is really important that we try and do something, and maybe this is something me and Amy we should talk about, is like, how do we bring empowerment to others who maybe don't have that privilege, that can't just like walk into a normal environment and just sort of call the shots, basically, because it is very, very tricky. And I think that it's tricky to have the privilege and still and do things, but if you don't have access to those, I kind of think of it from a business lens of just, you're not maybe, I suppose I present like I could work in venture capital in tech company, whatever it might be. So then when we were sort of taking this company to market and start, we were kind of like them, we sort of felt like them. So whereas that doesn't happen for everybody who has ADHD, and I massively appreciate that. And I feel like I'm very lucky in the way that it's presented or the way that I've managed to deal with it. But I really want to start. I was saying to you, I want to start posting more on LinkedIn and trying to actually do some more stuff alongside the amazing work that you're doing. I think that maybe this is the start of something that we're doing. I don't even know what that is, but is there a way that we can start helping, of like dragging other people up with us, basically, and through this and giving them the benefit of our experience. And I guess the sentiment, as we said at the start, is you can tell we're not professionals, but obviously we're experiencing it ourselves, and hopefully even this call helps people do something, but then maybe we create a little movement so we can help some other people.
I love that word, movement. And I do talk about this a lot because, as I said, like I do workshops with teams about inclusive hiring. And, I am, again, like a white woman going into these spaces. And it's my duty, if I'm a DE&I practitioner, to talk about it from an intersectional lens, and also like amplify other people's voices within that. So like, I'm very mindful, even, when I was setting up a startup and when I was in other situations, when I was at Twitter, like even one of the things, if you're a budget holder and you were working in the DE&I space, it's like, pick minority owned. Okay, minority is not the right word to use. Let's say pick Black owned agencies to our businesses to work with. Like you're a company, it's like, how can I actually put money into these other companies? How can I actually support these other businesses who are ran by people who are from underrepresented communities? And that's something, there's so many ways which we can be allies and which we can kind of elevate other voices that a lot of the time we don't think about. And of course, I talk about it a lot when it relates to hiring and, but when I had that program manager role at Twitter and I had this, a budget to, and my job was to partner with other companies so that we could attract diverse talent into Twitter. And I was like, okay, this makes sense that I go with, you know, I had a couple of different businesses that were Black owned. I had women owned businesses on board. And it's important to think about things like that. But I agree with you. Yeah, I would call it kind of like lending our privilege and absolutely bringing others up with us. And anyone that has followed me on or what's called LinkedIn knows how much I talk about equality, equity, inclusion. There's things I'm so passionate about. And I think, you know, I know how it feels to just desperately be wanting someone to give you a chance in a business. And that's probably why I'm so passionate about this, is like, I didn't have a degree. That was my, like, you know, my kind of underrepresented angle that I was coming from. And I have obviously got this kind of wiring differently. But there's so many other people that have so many more barriers holding them back. And it's like, okay, it's our job to kind of really find ways to amplify these other people and amplify these voices, you know, kind of share the load.
Yeah, definitely. Brilliant. Well, we're coming towards the end. So, I mean, first of all, thank you so much, Amy. Thanks for speaking to me about this in the first place, and obviously sharing and being so vulnerable on the call. It's like, it means a lot, and it's also been very powerful for me as well to like have you there as a human, quite aside from this call. Thanks everyone for coming along as well and for sharing your experiences in the comments and asking great questions and all that kind of stuff. So hopefully it was helpful in some kind of way. If you are working in TA internally, please join Hire if you're not part of it. I will personally bring you in because I haven't got anyone else to do that at the moment. So you can find us at hirehq.com. And well, follow us on LinkedIn. Amy's a big shot on LinkedIn these days as a top voice, so you definitely want to follow her more than me. She says a lot of very intelligent stuff, so and I'm going to try to at some point in the future. So thanks everyone, and we'll see you all soon. Thanks.
Thanks everyone.
Bye.
Bye.